Okie dokie, good to see you all today. Today I'm going to open by talking about the servant of God, Julia Greeley, this beautiful black Catholic lady who was born around 1833. And died 33 and died in 1918. She was born into slavery in Missouri, which was a slave state at the time. She and her family were later freed by the Civil War, but she had the nickname as a young girl of One-Eyed Julia. Why was she called One-Eyed Julia? Because she had lost the use of one of her eyes. Her right eye was damaged when her slave master was whipping her mother. So apparently in the process of beating her mother, little Julia got in the way and got hit in the eye, and that destroyed her right eye, so they called her One-Eyed Julia. Eventually, the family moved from Missouri to what was called at the time the Colorado Territory. Now, today, it is the state of Colorado, but at the time it was a territory. They moved to Denver, the region of Denver, and she worked as a cook and a nanny. Okay, so she is appropriately holding a little child there because a nanny takes care of the children of a family. She was not born a Catholic. I don't know what she was born as, what religion she might have professed. I'd have to look it up. But in 1880, she did enter into the Catholic Church and was baptized into the Catholic Church. So apparently she hadn't been baptized before. And she became a very devout and fervent Roman Catholic. She would go about the streets of Denver giving out Catholic literature, and she would also go around pulling a wagon, which was significant because she apparently had severe arthritis, so she was arthritic, so that was quite I would imagine it would be quite painful. She would pull around this wagon to distribute food, coal for fuel. Of course, Denver in winter can be quite cold, so she gave away coal, and she gave away clothing to poor families. And so she was called the Colored Angel of Charity. That was how people knew her. I guess if they didn't even know her name, they call her the Colored Angel of Charity, which, of course, nowadays we wouldn't call her that. I guess we call her an angel of color, which, I don't know, for me growing up sounds like the same thing, but nevertheless, that's what she was called in those days. We probably wouldn't call her that these days. And an interesting fact about this was that she would do this charitable work at nighttime. Why would she do this at night? Because she did not want to embarrass whites who would be receiving help from a black woman. They would still receive the help, but they might not have been so willing if they were going to receive it from this beautiful black woman, so she would accommodate them by doing it at night so no one could see her. So she died, and she was recognized as a very holy woman, and in 2014, her cause for canonization was opened up by the Archdiocese of Denver, and in 2021, they recognized, her virtues, or at least that she was a holy woman. So she's at the bottom of the rung for canonization. She is considered a servant of God. So she's just starting out. As I said, 2021 is when her cause was approved or received by the Vatican for further study. So let's hope, and I hope, that she will move along this rung to sainthood somewhat quickly. And I ask for her prayers for all of us in this class, that we will do well in the class, and that please pray to God, servant of God, Julia Greeley, that we may be blessed by God, especially in those things that might be harming us or hurting us or disturbing us. And may we be brought peace. Amen. Remember, we have quiz 2 on Friday, so be looking for that. And we will move on, thanks be to God, to Judaism today. So get out your tefillin and your matzo ball soup. Final My PowerPoint here. A lot of Judaism. Yes, there they are. Or there are some of them. Judaism. Judaism is one of the world's oldest world religions. It's one of the oldest world religions in the world, along with Hinduism. And as you can see here from the PowerPoint and from this this image I got from the, what is this? This guy who's publishing the American Jewish Yearbook in 2021. I got some updated numbers on how many Jews there are in the world. As you can see them here, so the current Jewish population is recorded as around 15,200,000, excuse me. And by breaking that up, which the person kindly does for us, or the person who did this image kindly did for us, the majority, or I guess you could say the plurality of Jews live in this nation-state of Israel, 6.9 million. And after that, the great majority outside of Israel live in the United States. We have 6 million here in the United States. And then in other countries in descending order, France has a lot of Jews. Canada has a lot of Jews. Okay, you see other countries with large Jewish populations. So roughly, from my count, it's about 2.3 million Jews scattered throughout the rest of the world after we take into account Israel and the United States. Historically, Judaism is not a large religion numerically. Okay? Remember, Hinduism has like around 1 billion people. Christianity has over 2 billion. Islam has 1.6 billion. It's approaching 2 billion. So, you have much, much larger religions. And historically, Judaism has not been a very large religion. And we can't even really say that religion is a world religion technically, because it's really been, for much of its history, well, I shouldn't say much of its history. Well, yeah, I can say this. It's been restricted to, the world of certainly the Middle East, Israel, but also the Mediterranean. And there are pockets of Jews in other places throughout the world, but it's very small communities. But usually it's been restricted to this part of the world, and it hasn't grown much beyond that. Okay? Except, of course, as I mentioned, the United States, but that's more of a modern development with the founding of our country about 200 years ago. So that's not a very long period of time. For much of its history, it has not been a world religion. So, why is it in the course of world religions? But we do talk about other religions, and maybe we will. They're certainly in your textbook, that are not world religions. Jainism, I've mentioned before, is primarily an Indian religion. So is Sikhism. Most Sikhs live in India. Places like, so they're relatively small numerically as well, like Judaism. But Judaism is regarded as a world religion because of its significance, because it is a significant influencer. Okay, its significance comes from being an influencer of 2 of the major world religions, namely Christianity and Islam. So you have 2 world religions, Christianity and Islam, which account for 3, maybe 3. If we do the numbers, 3.5, maybe approaching 4 billion people on the planet, who are believers in some way. Their belief systems in some way go back to this parent religion of Judaism. And we'll talk more about this later when we talk about the histories and beliefs of Christianity and Islam. Okay? So these 2 religions, although they're still very different, both derive their origins ultimately from this Middle Eastern religion, Judaism. Who is a Jew? What is a Jew? Well, that's a question. Is a Jew someone by race? Is it a racial distinction? Is it more of a religious distinction? The things they believe, okay? Well, let's talk about the racial distinction first. It doesn't seem to, it's an ethnicity. There are, not all Jews have the same ethnicity. As we'll find out, there are Jews that are from Eastern Europe and parts of Eastern Europe and Central Europe, but there are Jews also from Southern Europe, places like Spain, okay, and they're Jews. So it's not, necessarily a unified race of people. People have different ethnic origins and still call themselves Jews. Religion, you might say, well, it's the religion, but not a lot of Jews. Well, I shouldn't say that. There are a significant number of Jews who don't practice the religion or don't believe in the religion. In fact, in the state of Israel, the nation of Israel, which is defined as a Jewish state, roughly about half the people who identify as Jews don't practice the religion at all. And then you've got the other half, and you have some that practice it very strictly, like the Orthodox Jews, and other Jews that don't practice the religion, but practice it in less strict forms. So it's not always a matter of religion for some Jews. Is it a culture? Well, as I said, there are different cultures. There are some Jews that their culture is very much rooted in Polish culture, or Slavic culture, I should say, in general. There are other Jews where the culture is more Hispanic, to be, interestingly enough. So there are different cultural versions of Judaism within Judaism. And is it citizenship? Is it just, are you a Jew if you're a citizen of, like, the state of Israel, the Jewish state? Well, no, because they have Arab Israelis as well, who are both Muslim and Christian. In fact, a lot of Arab Israelis used to be Christians, but there's been an exodus out of the country because of all the problems. You have people who are citizens of the state of Israel who are not of the Jewish religion, but not even of a Jewish ethnicity, you might say. Okay, they don't have origins within even the ethnic origins of Judaism. Their mothers weren't Jews and stuff like that. So it's it's kind of like defining what is a Hindu. It's more of a culture than a creed. Defining a Jew can also be something that's difficult because it can mean so many different things, even amongst Jews themselves. Nevertheless, Mr. Hanley, I have to do something to earn my bones. I can't talk about Judaism when we can't define Jews. All right, so we'll look at tradition. Who is a Jew? And according to traditional Jewish halakha, as it's called, or law, the standard is this. You are a Jew if you were born to a Jewish mother or you converted to Judaism. Those are the two standards. Okay? So the first one's pretty straightforward. Your mother is of Jewish lineage, okay, and her mother was of Jewish lineage, and so on and so on. Notice it doesn't go through the father, okay? So, what do you do if you my mom's Catholic but my father's Jewish? Okay, well, technically, at least according to some Jews, not all Jews, but according to Orthodox Jewish law, the group that's called Orthodox, and unfortunately they're the ones that control immigration to Israel, you would not be considered a Jew. You would probably have to convert to Judaism, even though your father was Jewish, because this is just the law. Okay, not all Jews accept this, but the ones that are the strictest followers of tradition do. Okay. What would conversion entail? Conversion to Judaism includes a process called a mikveh, which is a ritual bath. You would dunk yourself in water. Mr. Bowski, where have I heard that before? Yes, Mr. Bowski. Dunking yourself in water. Have you ever heard of people doing that in a religion? Where have you heard of that, sir? Which religion? Catholics? Good. We're there. What are Catholics in general? Because there are more than just Catholics. They're also Protestants. What are they in general called? Not coming to you? That's okay. Oh, okay, so we got Catholic, and that's good, Mr. Bird.
Christians.
Christians. Okay, so in general, Christians. Christianity. I just told you a few moments ago that Christianity is one of the major world religions, very large religion numerically, also spread throughout the world, so it qualifies as a world religion, and it comes from Judaism. Well, it's not surprising that it has Jewish practices. One of these practices is dunking in water, a mikveh. Okay, so for conversion, you would ritually dunk yourself in water. You would also promise to observe the law of Moses, the various religious laws of the religion, the observance of the law. And if you're a man, of course, it's not applied to a woman, but if you're a man, of course, there is the issue of circumcision. Maybe. Anyways, where they cut off the foreskin of the penis. Again, it's 12:47 p.m. Still too early in the day to talk about genitalia, but I got to talk about it because it's it's part of the human condition, and the human condition is part of religions. Okay, so these would be three things that you would have to do. On this PowerPoint, I give you some pictures of various Jews. So it, kind of addresses the question of, is it a race? Is it a culture? Well, a lot of people might consider Jews to be white people. They have white skin. Not all Jews. Here are black Jews from Africa, from Ethiopia, the Palashas, who claim to be descendants of one of the ancient kings of the Jews, a man named King Solomon. Then we have what people might traditionally consider to be Jews, guys with big black hat, broad-rimmed hats. They're wearing their prayer shawls. They're in the process of prayer. Okie dokie. Maybe a more traditional view. Oh, but then we have Jews here. Jews in India, the B'nai Yisrael, as they're called, the sons and daughters of Israel. We don't know how they got there. The story is there was a shipwreck at some period of time in the past of Jews. And they stayed and they kind of developed their own traditions and customs and stuff like that. So they are considered Jews, even though, look at them, they're Indians. They're of the Indian ethnicity, people from the subcontinent of India. So there you go. And they're all Jews because they have Jewish mothers in their case. Maybe they converted as well, who knows? I don't know their personal story. Okay, what does conversion look like? Well, I thought it might be interesting to show it to you. So I have this video. The Jewish conversion of Mariam and Sarah. Mariam is Hebrew for Mary. Oops, sorry about that. Let me eyeglasses. Let me just go back for a second because I want to explain. Whoops. Okay, because you have to be fully unclothed during Tevilah. That's the name for it. Tevilah is the Hebrew word for immersion, just so you know. She couldn't tape that process, okay, but she's showing the process for her baby who is naked. So she's not showing her going through it. I'll talk about that after we finish. So if you don't want to see a naked baby, you can leave or not look or whatever. But.
Notice there are 7 steps to everything.
I just noticed how once I get in your house.
So, right. So when you do, okay, you do glow in her.
She likes swimming.
Okay.
Yeah, so this time she likes
She wants to swim.
After each
Okay.
Baruch atah Adonai Elohim melech haolam asher nishani yitzchak al Tzivanu al Tevila.
Okay.
Okay, so she's speaking Hebrew. In case you didn't know, what does she say? She basically says, blessed be you, Lord, King of the universe, for giving us your commandments about immersion. How we're supposed to do it. Sing, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is the Lord alone, the one God.
Adonai, Elohim melech haolam, asher kishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu ha'avadenu. Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, shehecheyanu l'kimanu v'chikiyanu l'zman hazeh.
So I'd like you to read, first of all, is this our Bible?
To the children of Israel everywhere, greetings. I hereby attest that I have voluntarily decided to adopt the Jewish religion as my own and to become a full-fledged member of the Jewish people. To this end, I have engaged in the study of the basic beliefs and practices of Judaism. I have also voluntarily had the rite of Tevilah, ritual immersion, in the presence of qualified witnesses.
Wonderful. So having done that, we're here to officially welcome you, Sarah. Brachot HaMaot, Hashem Adonai, blessed are you who come here in the name of Adonai. At this sacred, joyous moment, we renew the covenant of Sinai between God and the people of Israel, calling the words of the prophet Yeshaya, Isaiah, strangers shall join them and shall cleave the house of Israel. Oh God, we thank you for your many blessings, and we thank you for the truth you have revealed to all humanity. Above all, we thank you for the gift of Torah, which has ever been a light for our path. We recall with reverence and gratitude all those descendants of Abraham and Sarah who have been faithful to you, and those who with their own choice have sought to serve you. For your faith people. Oh God, grant your loving favor to Mary. At this time, in this place, we welcome her into Jewish life. We know the history of martyrdom of our people. You have chosen to join yourself with our people's heart. We open our hearts to you. May God strengthen you in your resolve and help you to live in fidelity to the decision you have made, the promises you have made to honor. May you always have satisfaction and joy in the fulfillment of sacred mitzvah. Grant Mary years of strength and happiness. We praise you, Lord, in His presence and fullness of joy. Shabbat Shabbat, Shabbat Chodesh Elul Shmat Hameshet Alafim Shvam Amot, Shibim V'Shtayim, L'Minan Shalom Monim Chad Olam Kuper Canada, Ispacha, Mary Klein, El Maharat Yisrael, Betzana, Shib Betzot, Yitzhak B'Chaneinu, that on the 24th day of August 2012, corresponding to the 6th day of Elul, 5772, according to the official Hebrew calendar as part of the congregation of Shalom event, Mary Kleiner entered the historic covenant between God and the people of Israel, and of her own free will, she made the following declaration.
I make this affirmation as I enter the eternal covenant between God and the Jewish people, the children of Israel. I choose to become a Jew of my own free will. I accept Judaism to the exclusion of all other religions, faith, and practices, and now pledge my loyalty to Judaism and the Jewish people under all circumstances. I promise to establish a Jewish home and participate actively in the life of the synagogue and the Jewish community. I commit myself to the pursuit of Torah and Jewish knowledge. If I am blessed with children, I will rear them as Jews.
Now, Rabbi Brown is going to read a passage from Ruth, where she said with her mother,
which said, treat me not to leave you or to return in the following verse. Wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you lodge, I will lodge. Where people shall be my people and your God my God. Where you die, I will die, and will I be buried.
Our cousin is going to chant the Yeshivera, in which we praise God, we thank God, and we use your Hebrew name, Miriam, for the very, very first Yeshivera.
So this goes on.
Everywhere greetings. We hereby attest that our daughter Sarah finds.
All right, so I'm not going to go through the rest of it. That's her husband, obviously. I think this is probably, and we'll learn about this later, I think this is probably a reform. If I had to take a guess, Reform Jews, because if you were doing it the Orthodox style, the more stricter style, everything would be in Hebrew. Nothing would be in the language of the people, in this case, English. You can see connections again with the later religion of Christianity. Well, actually, differences and connections, because in Judaism you baptize yourself. You would immerse yourself in water. And in Christianity, this was an innovation that Jesus of Nazareth did. It was you're baptized by somebody else, which was unusual for Judaism. And notice she said that she went through the process. She didn't show it, but she had to go through it naked. You have to go through it naked when you enter into the water and the process of conversion. Why? Because Adam and Eve, it's referring back to that creation account in their scriptures, their sacred writings, where God creates human beings. He creates them naked. Okay? So it's kind of harkening back to the beginning of time. Which a lot of religions do in their mythology and in their rituals. They do practices that go back to their creation stories. So, for example, she would have been naked. The baby's obviously naked to imitate that. She breathes in the face of her daughter, Sarah, which is also taken from the creation account of the Jewish writings, because God breathes in the face of the man that he creates and makes him a living being. So this is like bringing new life into her as a Jew. Okay? The connection with Christianity is that traditionally Christianity also baptized in the new. We know this from records of the first few centuries. And in fact, certain Christians still do this. For example, if you're an Eastern Christian, Russian Orthodox, or Eastern Catholic, I happen to be Eastern Catholic, I don't have any kids, so I don't know this from personal experience. No kids that I know. Well, I don't receive any Father's Day cards, so I'm assuming that. Anyways, babies are still baptized in the nude in Eastern Christianity, not in Western Christianity. The Roman Catholics, everyone's dressed up, but they still continue on that tradition amongst Eastern Christian churches, where at least babies are baptized in the nude, and they're also dumped down into the water in some way baptism. Or any person is, I should say. Even an adult will be dumped down, they're taken to a river and dumped. So there are still connections with Judaism and Christianity in their practice of mikvah or tevilah in the Christian way. Okay? We talked about the Catholic Church's view of other religions. You see kind of an exclusivity here as well. She has to read a statement. It's like she's making a contract with the Jewish people where she states that I'm voluntarily doing this. No one's forcing me to do this. And I'm accepting the religion of Judaism. And I'm excluding all other religions. And if I have children, they will be raised as Jews. So they're not following their own path. You have an obligation. You find this in a lot of religions. But, so it just, ties into some of the things we talked about with the Catholic Church, which has also a kind of an exclusive view of itself. Well, you find that exclusivism in other religions. Hinduism, we just talked about, considers it the ultimate religion of the universe. Can't get more exclusive than that. Anyways, so Judaism. What does it believe? If we could boil down Judaism into a couple of essential beliefs, I think these two would be essential, and these were kind of expressed in the statements that Mary made when she was converting, if you were listening to what she was saying. The first one would be monotheism, the Lord. They mention Adonai, the Lord, the one God of the universe. So there is monotheism, the belief in only one God. There's only one God who is the creator and ruler of the cosmos. So that was there in the mikveh ceremony. Monotheism comes from two Greek words, monos, which means only or soul or alone, and from theos, which means God. And Judaism is the first human religion to clearly come to this belief, to proclaim the absoluteness, to proclaim monotheism in its absoluteness, that there is one God only. The second belief is in election or choice. And we also heard this in the statements that she read in her contract that she was making when she was converting, Mary was making when she was converting, is that God has chosen the people of Israel, the Jews, as his special people to whom he has revealed his will for life. They are the elect. They are the chosen. And that's what the word elect means. Elego in Latin means to choose. So an election is when you're choosing something. We'll have an election in several months from now. Choosing. So those would be, I think, the two central ideas that kind of thread through Judaism. The belief in only one God, and that this one God of the cosmos has entered into a special relationship with these people called the Jews. I guess I get into that later. Hold on one second. Kind of giving stuff away, but I want to make sure that maybe I put it in another place on my PowerPoint. That annoys me. No, it's good. Hold on one second. Just want to make sure that I did. Whoops. Oh, okay. That's annoying. Let me just check my other PowerPoint. Because I want to talk about the two cultural forms of Judaism. I'm sure I put them on the PowerPoint. But maybe I did transfer it. Is a number one. All right, well, we'll go with this one. Not perfect, but here we go. This is an old PowerPoint, but at least it's got it. Okay, these two forms, forget about the numbers, and the numbers are old anyways, because I revised them up to 15 million. But there are two cultural forms of Judaism, Ashkenazi and Sephardi. Actually, there's a third one as well that I'll get into, but, which is related to Sephardi. But these are the two main cultural forms. The word Ashkenaz is a Hebrew word which means Germany. It's the Hebrew word for the country of Germany. And Sephardi comes from the Hebrew word Sepharad, which means, it means the area. I put Spain here, but it means Spain and Portugal, the whole Iberian Peninsula. So I should include Portugal. What is Ashkenazi Judaism? It is the cultural form of Judaism that developed in countries like France, Germany, and Eastern Europe. Okay, so the countries of France, Germany, and Eastern Europe. And Sephardi Judaism is the cultural form that developed on what's called the Iberian Peninsula. So if we look at a map, go to our maps. All right. Okay. So Ashkenazi is from this region, France, Germany, and Eastern Europe, and this is the Iberian Peninsula where Sephardi comes from. It's two countries of Spain and Portugal. Actually, there's a tiny, tiny country here in the mountains called Andorra, but we'll worry about them. But Spain and Portugal on this peninsula. Peninsula is a piece of land bounded by three bodies of water. So the Iberian Peninsula, because the Romans called this whole area Iberia in Latin. So the Iberian Peninsula. Most Jews come from the Ashkenazi ethnic variety. Most Jews come from the Ashkenazi. They're Ashkenaz. Where do they come from? Well, I told you about the Ashkenazi. The Sephardi Jews, I told you, come from Spain and Portugal, and they actually migrated, okay? So I have to talk about that, because the Sephardi Jews kind of had a different historical situation than the Ashkenazis did, because the Sephardi Jews in Spain and Portugal were persecuted. In 1492, the Jews were expelled from Spain. They were given the choice, the Christian king and queen of, they pushed the Muslims out, and they were able to the Christian nobility, the king and the queen, were able to reconquer a lot of Spain from the Muslims who had been there. And there were Jews in the region, and they basically gave them the choice, convert or go away. And a lot of Jews decided to go away. So in 1492, Jews were expelled from Spain, so they left. Well, I shouldn't say they left. They went to Portugal, which is that little country neighboring Spain. But then a few years later, in 1496, the Catholic king of Portugal decided, well, you Jews need to either convert or go. So they went away. 1496, they were expelled from Portugal. So where do they go? Well, they spread throughout North Africa and the Middle East. So again, if we go back to our map, okay, Jews are here in Spain, had to go to Portugal for safety so they could live in peace, but they were kicked out of Portugal, so they went to places like Northern Africa, Egypt, and the Middle Eastern regions. So Sephardi Jews are often identified, they have their roots in the Iberian Peninsula, but they are also identified with regions like the Middle East and Northern Africa. Hence, we get a third, sometimes you'll get this third group mentioned, which is connected to the Sephardi Jews, called the Mizrahi Jews. Sometimes spelled with a C, sometimes it's pronounced Mizrahi. So sometimes I'll have it with a C, but Mizrahi Jews, which is the cultural form of Judaism which develops in the Near East, in the Middle East. And the word Mizrahi comes from the Hebrew word Mitzrahi, which means Eastern. And so it's used for Jews who are resident in the Middle East, but as the Sephardis come in the 15th century, because they're expelled or they're forced to leave from Spain and Portugal, the Sephardi Jews mix with these Middle Eastern Jews, and they adopt many of their customs. So oftentimes the Mizrahi Jews are just simply identified with the Sephardi Jews because they take over a lot of the customs that the Sephardis bring with them when they show up. So we have two basic cultural forms, kind of a third, but the third is subsumed really under Sephardi cultural form. Now back to the other PowerPoint. Actually, there we go. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the history of Judaism and see what it tells us about the development of their beliefs and their beliefs in general. For the history of Judaism, we really have to deal with their sacred writings, which we call the Bible. Oh, is that Ms. Balser? Oh, I didn't see you come in. Sorry, Ms. Balser.
Oh, yeah? Sorry.
No, you're fine. Make sure you're here. Okay. You have to deal with their sacred writings. So we have to go to the Bible, all right? But biblical historiography, the writing of history, although it's an essential source of our information, it has to be read cautiously because it's being told from, a particular point of view, all right? It's not necessarily a history book. Archaeological research in the ancient Near East, or even the study of historical records from the surrounding populations, are a much more reliable source for the everyday life of, what we call biblical times. The origins of Judaism center around the regions of Mesopotamia and Egypt. Look here on this map I have. This is the region of Mesopotamia, mainly the modern-day country of Iraq, modern-day country of Syria, Lebanon, okay? Mesopotamia, which literally means between the two rivers, and that's what it is. It's between the Tigris River and the Euphrates River, so these two great rivers that flow down into the Persian Gulf. Okay? Mesopotamia, what else did I say? Egypt. Egypt, which is over here, modern-day country of Egypt, and also ancient Egypt. So this is where Judaism develops. What we would call the Middle East in general. What in modern times we call the Middle East. What is it east of? I don't know, probably Europe. So it's kind of a Eurocentric view of the world. It's east of us, so we'll call it middle. It's the East. All right. We start with the time of the patriarchs, or ancient Israel, which begins, as far as we can tell, around 1900 BC and extends to the 500s BC. The 500s BC. Okie dokie. And as I said, it's called the time of the patriarchs. Why? Because we see the rise of these father figures, these men who are the heads of important families in the history of Judaism. A patriarch is the male head of a family. It comes from two Greek words, pater, which means father, and arche, which arche has a lot of meanings. It basically means the foundation of something, but it can also mean, head or leader or something like that. The beginning as well. Okay, so the fathers who are the beginning of these families. According to the oral tradition, the tradition passed on by word of mouth. None of this was being written down at the time. It was all being passed on as stories. According to these stories, we have these stories of father figures, patriarchs, and their family histories, which are the ultimate origin of the Jews and Judaism. Where do we find these stories? Mostly in the first book of the Bible, what's called the book of Genesis. Really shouldn't say mostly, only in the book of Genesis would be more accurate, actually. The first book of the Bible. It tells the stories of these patriarchs. So, for example, I'm just going to go over some interesting things that maybe you've heard these words, but you don't know where they come from, so you don't maybe know why Jews are called these things, so I'll go over them. For example, we have the story of this man called Noah. Maybe you've heard of him, Noah and his ark. And we have a flood story in the book of Genesis. Remember, we had a flood story with Vishnu in Hinduism as well. So something happened in the Middle East that was a flood. Anyways, so we have this guy Noah and it tells the story of his family during the flood, and he has 3 sons, and one of his sons is Shem. Shem, who is believed to be an ancient ancestor of the Jews. Hence, from Shem, we get the name Semite. So Jews are sometimes called Semites after this ancient ancestor, the son of Noah, Shem. Okay? Shem is the great-grandfather, which means that this dude's grandfather, so he would be the second grandfather before this guy. Shem is the great-grandfather of another man named Eber, from which we get our word Hebrew. So the sons and daughters of Shem, the Semites, the sons and daughters are the people of Eber, the Hebrews. Another term for the Jews. I'll pause here and just add. In fact, this is a term that's used a lot in the older books of the Bible to describe these people. They're called Hebrews, and scholars wonder what is a Hebrew in particular. We're not sure what a Hebrew is. There are ancient records from Mesopotamia which mention groups of drifters and mercenaries, people who fight for money. And they were called by a catch-all term, Apiru or Habiru, which is very similar to the term for Hebrew, or the Habiru. So scholars debate and wonder, is this where the word Hebrew ultimately comes from? And they made up this story of an ancestor called Eber, a similar name, to describe that they are wanderers or they are drifters. This has some evidence in the Jewish sacred writings, because in a book called the Book of Deuteronomy, Book of Deuteronomy was a chapter 26, verse 5. If you want to look it up on the internet or wherever, just to give you the reference, it actually describes the Jewish ancestors as wanderers from the north of this region called Canaan, that they're wanderers. So there seems to be some connection possibly between these groups of wanderers and drifters called the Apiru and this word Hebrew, and that might be part of the origins of what these people were. They were wandering around the deserts of the northern Mesopotamia, and they eventually settled down into Canaan, or what is today modern-day Israel. According to the story as it's given in the Bible, the Jews' sacred writings, there was a man living in ancient Iraq, in Mesopotamia, in this city called southern Iraq, or southern Mesopotamia. This man's name was Abraham, or Abram is another version of his name. He's given two names. Abram of Ur, or Abraham of Ur. And Abram of Ur feels compelled by a god that he's worshiping, who he was already worshiping, or did this god reveal himself uniquely to Abram of Ur? We don't know from the story, but apparently he was worshiping some god, and this god told him to travel, which was an unusual request because people in the ancient world usually did not travel. It was dangerous and just was inefficient and not necessary. You stayed where you were. But this God tells him to travel to this faraway land of Canaan. Okay, so this is all desert. So he would travel up the rivers, and then he would travel down here through mountains. And that's exactly what the Jewish sacred writings said that he did. So that seems to be historical. So he travels to this faraway land of Canaan, and there, this God that he believes in promises to be a special God for Abram and for his future family. I say future family because at this time, according to the story, Abram/Abraham is very, very old, and his wife is very, very old. She's past menopause, clearly. They probably can't have children. And yet this God is telling him, oh yeah, you're going to have tons of children. Okay. So he makes these promises. As long as you worship me as your special God, I will make promises to you. He promises to this man Abraham that he will give him many children, that he will give him land, specifically the land of Canaan that he's brought him to, even though this man Abram is a foreigner. and that he will make Abram's family into a great nation, even though this guy has no children yet, and of course, and his wife is past the prime for childbearing. I should give you her name. His wife's name is Sarai, also called Sarah. And you might have noticed in the process of Mary and Sarah's conversion, the rabbi mentioned these two people in their contract. You know, that she was joining, or they were joining themselves to the people of Abraham and Sarah. Okay, so Sarah is the wife. So this is the first of the patriarchs. This man Abraham, and we could also say matriarchs if we include his wife Sarai or Sarah. They do eventually have a son, according to the story. So this God keeps its promise. He does have a child, actually has a couple of children, but the one that's important for the storyteller is this one, Isaac, who is not really that important, only as the fulfillment of the promise. So I put his name in smaller print because he's not, he's a patriarch, but he's more like a bridge between Abraham and then this guy, Jacob, who's really important. Isaac, the son of Abram, gives birth to a son, Jacob. Again, one of his sons. It wasn't his only son, his only child. This man, Jacob, who also, for some reason, goes by the name of Israel. We don't know why. There's a story told in the Bible why his name was also Israel. We don't know why. But we do know that Jacob, Israel, is very important to the story because Jacob has like around 12 sons, depending on how you count them. Depending. It's supposed to be 12, but it could be 13 or 14. But all right, depending on how you count them, there are 12 sons. And these sons have families of their own. And so now you have family groups deriving from this man, Jacob, Israel. You now have tribes. Tribes are a social group that has distinct or unified characteristics. Oftentimes, tribes are united by their birth. Okay, they're related people in the tribe in some way, shape, or form. Not always, but, you know, certainly in this case, they all derive their origins from this man, Jacob, also known as Israel. So he has two names. The word tribe, as you see, tribus simply means the division of a group of people. Okay, so you have different family divisions. So, Semite, Hebrew, and now we have sons and daughters of Israel, or Israelites. So, the name Israel is not the name of a nation or a country, it's the name of a man. They are the sons and daughters, not of the country Israel, they are the sons and daughters of Israel, a man whose name was also Jacob. Jews believe they are descended from these 12 tribes, these 12 family groups that come from this one man, Jacob, Israel. And more specifically, they come from one of his sons whose name was Judah, or Yehuda, hence Jew. So Jew, when you talk about the Jews, in Judaism, you see it right there in the name of the religion, Judah, from the son Judah, whose family group come from this man Jacob / Israel, the patriarch. According to the story, Jacob and his family eventually migrate from Canaan, modern-day Israel or Palestine, down to the nation of Egypt. Go back to they migrate from Canaan over here to Egypt, where the family settles and stays there, according to the story, for several centuries. According to the story as it's told in the Bible, the Jews' sacred writings, the people of Israel, the Israelites, become enslaved or oppressed by the local Egyptians. And that event, or that, I should say event, but that situation of slavery or oppression leads to a very momentous event in the history of Judaism, which is called the Exodus. Exodus comes from two Greek words, ex, which means out of, and hodos, which means away, way. So literally it means a way out, or as we call it in English, an exit. A way out is an exit. And this was the exit, the liberation or the exit of the Israelites from slavery in Egypt. It's the Exodus. That's what it's called religiously. For scholars, they see it more as there's at some point these people who were living in Egypt, maybe they were there the whole time, we don't know, and then they just connected themselves up with the Jews later on, but it's possible. Anyways, there seems to have been at some point, a migration of peoples from Egypt into Canaan, and maybe there was a mixture with the local population who were already there. They took over the stories of the Exodus from Egypt with their own local stories of their patriarchs, and so they added them to, and then the Bible tries to make it all fit together, like, oh yeah, don't you remember Jacob went down to Egypt, and then they all came back and stuff like that. But anyways, that's kind of inside baseball, right, Mr. Rosley? I don't want to... Mr. Rosley, you ever seen my Vulcan grip? It's more of an underhand guy, I guess. Anywho. When did this happen? Sometime around maybe 1250 BC is the traditional date. Okay, that's what's given. There's no hard and fast evidence for the existence as an historical event, so it's difficult to rather pinpoint it. I'm not saying it didn't happen. Like with most things in the ancient world, people weren't there with video cameras or cell phones, so you're not going to find a lot of evidence for a lot of things from the ancient world, even though you just mainly have stories. So you got to take them for what they're worth. But, what do we know? We don't have a record of a mass migration, at least in the Egyptian texts or monuments. They don't mention something like that. Would they mention something like that? Who knows? Again, you're supposing here. Though there is the acknowledgement from archaeological data of a people called Israel around this time. So we have a stone from, 1208 BC. It's called the Merneptah stele. Should have put on the PowerPoint, but I didn't. Oh well. The Merneptah stele. A stele is just a big piece of stone on which they inscribe things. Okay? And what did I say? 1208 BC. And on that stone, it actually mentions the name of a people called Israel, a nation of people called Israel. So we do have some historical evidence for this people. Problem with this evidence is that they're not mentioned as being in Egypt. They're mentioned as being from the land of Canaan, okay, at the time. At the time, supposedly, when the Exodus, well, actually before the time that the Exodus supposedly occurred. So anyway, it doesn't exactly agree with the story as it is in the sacred writings of the Jews. What happens with the Exodus? We have this figure of a man called Moses who could have lived anywhere between 1500 and 1200 BC, but 1200 BC is the traditional date, okay? If he existed at this time in the 1200s, then scholars think he was probably alive during the time when this man Ramses II was Pharaoh of Egypt, or king of Egypt, Ramses II, who reigned from, 1290 to 1224. Again, we don't know because the name of the king of the Egyptians is never mentioned in this Jewish sacred writing, so we don't know. We do know that Moses is not a Jewish name. Moses is actually an Egyptian name, and you see it right here in the name of Ramses II. You see the basis for the name. You have the M and the S and the S. Okay? So Moses, supposedly a Hebrew, not an ethnic Egyptian, actually has an Egyptian name. How is this so? Was he actually a Hebrew or a Jew? We don't know. According to the sacred writings, he was, even though he had an Egyptian name, and he was supposedly raised by the Egyptians. So he didn't come from a Jewish family. So do we see here evidence in the sacred writings that Moses was not actually an Israelite? Possible. Anyways, Moses has an experience of his people's God, the God of Israel, which leads him to believe that he must bring them back to their mythical homeland. Egypt is not their homeland. Canaan is their homeland. So they have to go back there. And so he does this under the pretext of liberating the Jews who were operating as slaves, according to the story. In the process of this God who calls him to do this makes a contract through him with all the Israelites. The Jews will only have God as their father God, their main God. And this God identifies himself specifically as the God of the patriarchs from Canaan. And through Moses, the Israelites receive a law for how they are to be as a community and how they're supposed to live when they return to their homeland. So this event of the Exodus should not be underestimated in the understanding, the mindset, and the history of Judaism. This event shapes everything for Judaism. In fact, it dominates the opening of their sacred writings. They're the first 5 books of their Bible, of their scriptures. I mentioned the book of Genesis, but the other 4 are all devoted to this event of the Exodus. It's a very important event for them. So Moses is portrayed as the liberator of the Hebrew slaves, as a founder of their religion and lawgiver, also as the first and the greatest of the prophets, kind of like a holy man who receives messages from God. There's the 12 tribes. Why do I have that there? Anyways. Don't know why I put that there. But anyways, that's just a picture of how the 12 tribes of Israel, Jacob Israel were grouped in Canaan at the time. Don't want to say more than that. Okay. So the people of Israel returned to their homeland in Canaan. Eventually, the tribes, well, maybe that's why I put the map there, now I'm thinking about it. Oh, man. Whew. Sorry, I was in my exercise class last night. The lady killed us. I'm still sore. Oh, man. You always hurt the ones you love, you know? Anyways, I think this is why I had the picture here. They go back and they settle in their tribal areas. There are different tribal areas. So these are different tribes of the sons. You have Judah here in the south, Simeon, Dan, etc., and so forth. It's a mishmash. And it's also a mess because you don't call it the 12 tribes at all here because you're missing the tribe of Levi. And you also have the tribe of Joseph. Which is Manasseh and Ephraim, I think. Anyways, so whatever. Take it for what it's worth. This is a map of where they're described as. This is their local areas where they're supposed to reside in the land of Canaan. So they have kind of a loose confederation of tribes in the land of Canaan, but eventually they unite. They want a king. They unite under one leader, and they establish a kingdom, a monarchy government. And so for a period of time, you have a monarchy called the United Monarchy, which dates from around the 1040s BC and goes until 920 BC. The first king of this monarchy who's recorded is a man named Saul ben Kish. Saul, the son of Kish, who we don't know the dates of his life, but we believe he reigned around 1000 BC. So he's their first king. His son Ishbaal succeeds him, and there's not much that needs to be said about Ishbaal other than that as Ishbaal succeeds, a civil war immediately follows with this dude, David. David is from the tribe of Judah in the south, and so they support him as one of their own, and they want him to be king, not Ishbaal, so they try to overthrow Saul's son Ishbaal, and so they have that minor civil war, and Ishbaal is killed, and David, of course, is not killed, so David becomes the next king, essentially, and he reigns around 1000 BC. And he's considered the greatest of the Jewish kings. There'll be more kings after him, but he's considered the greatest, this man, King David. He makes Jerusalem, he makes the city, ancient city. It wasn't a Jewish city. He conquered it, the city of Jerusalem here. He decides to make that the capital of his kingdom. And he defeats or neutralizes surrounding enemies, other groups, non-Jewish groups or non-Israelite groups, and brings peace to the region. He initiates plans to build a temple. He wants to build a sanctuary where they can worship their God and perform their sacrificial rites, but he doesn't do this in his lifetime. His son will do it, though. He is not the first king, as I said, but he is seen as the greatest, and he's described in the Jewish writings as having a very special relationship with God. David's son comes after him. You can see the dates for this man, Solomon. He's the one who will build the place of worship for their God called the temple. They'll build it in Jerusalem. Okay? So that's his significance to the story. He also extends the kingdom, pushes out the boundaries of the kingdom somewhat. He has a reputation for being a wise man, a wise king. But the biblical view on him is mixed. You know, there's positive and negative. On the one hand, he's a wise person, but on the other hand, he has many wives, many of whom are foreigners, and as foreigners, they bring in their foreign gods, and Solomon allows them to bring in the worship of these false gods, which offends the Israelite God, who's supposed to be the only God they worship. And Solomon has a son named Rehoboam who succeeds him. And an interesting question is, was Rehoboam a Jew? Was he an Israelite? Because according to the biblical story, his mother was a foreigner, one of these foreign wives. She was not a Jewish woman. Did she convert? I don't know. The Bible doesn't say so. But she is identified as a foreigner. We know that when Solomon builds the temple, this place of worship, he uses a lot of workers from the northern part of the kingdom, a lot of the northern tribes. Okay, so we get a sense from the Jewish sacred writings. This is a picture of the United Kingdom and the extent of its boundaries or influence. And we get a sense from the Jewish sacred writings that, he's really, Solomon was very kind of oppressive of the northern tribes. There's kind of a north-south divergence here, okay? Maybe the southerners look down on the northerners, but they used a lot of the workers from the north and really oppressed them. Solomon oppressed them, at least according to the story. And when Solomon died, there was the hope that his successor, Rehoboam, would kind of ease the oppression and the taxes and stuff like that. So the northern tribes sent representatives to Rehoboam saying, could you kind of ease things, make things better for us? And the response recorded in the Jewish sacred writings, the Bible, is Rehoboam says to them that, if my father beat you with rods on your back, I will beat you with scorpions. So, so not really the best response that they wanted to hear. So basically what you have is another kind of, I guess you could call it a civil war or an insurrection, where, and this occurs in 932 BC on the PowerPoint, where the northern tribes say, okay, see ya, we've had enough of this. So they secede from the United Kingdom, and they actually establish their own northern kingdom with their own king, with their own capital, and they basically repudiate the southern kingdom. So now you don't have a united kingdom anymore. You have a divided kingdom between the north and the south. There's a picture of what we believe to have been the temple at the time of, I don't think it's the Solomon's temple. I think this is it's the second temple. So, well, it's not Solomon's temple, but the Jewish temple. Take it for what it's worth. It's a recreation of what it might have looked like in Jerusalem, according to the description in the Bible or historical records. Okay? So you have the house of God in the middle, where God lives, and where the priesthood, they perform sacrifices. You have the court of the Israelites, which is where this is the court of the Israelites around the house, where men can enter. This is the court of the women, where Jewish women can enter. And then this large court surrounding it is the court of the nations, where anybody can go and walk around. So here's a map, just so you can see. I'll end on this, but the divided kingdom, where now you have a northern kingdom and a southern kingdom with two rival monarchies, all Jews, all Israelites, but they're just not united under the same ruler anymore. Okay, and I'll talk more about this on Tuesday, what happens to the divided kingdom eventually. Okay, good to see you all. God bless you all. Have a good weekend. Have a good day, sir. Thank you.